I was one of those people who made it a point never to watch the news. I shunned the newspapers, despised talk radio, avoided conversations concerning current events like the goddamn plague. I didn't follow politics, didn't vote, didn't care. I didn't want to be involved. I was proud of my apathy, and many times I had to argue my right to remain ignorant with family and friends. I felt those matters were out of my control. I felt that if I ever gave in and followed the herd, this useless information would be wasting valuable space on my personal hard drive. In my opinion, the news was always shitty, and politicians all belonged to the same club of lying liars. I minded my own business, paid my taxes, and lived a quiet life. I just wanted to be left alone. I know now that I was part of the problem. Of course, it's virtually impossible to remain ignorant, no matter how hard you try. Information is like water, and a healthy brain is a sponge. Some news stories are impossible to avoid. They attack you from every conceivable angle until you have no choice but to submit to their power. Despite my deep convictions, I learned long ago that, like it or not, these stories would become the exception to the rule. You can't hide from a war, even if it takes place on the other side of the planet. Inflation slaps you in the face each time you make a purchase. Movies and music are filled with images to corrupt your beliefs. Headlines leap out at you from magazine racks and billboards. People talk. You form opinions. I know. Get to the point, right? The point is, I was an ignorant bastard. But something happened to change all that, which is where my story begins. As apathetic as I was, that doesn't mean I lacked compassion or empathy. As hypocritical as that may sound, I still cared. So when the day arrived when all the crazy people decided to go arm themselves and go shoot up shopping malls, theaters, and schools, I was deeply affected by this illogical string of tragedies. Like many people, I placed the blame on the media for reaching new lows in hyping up these events. This is where I found myself being sucked into the propaganda machine, like watching a train wreck in slow motion. I couldn't turn away, even when the stations took 6 minutes of commercial breaks for each 3 minutes of coverage. Capitalizing on tragedies is both shameless and despicable. But it's the American way. The lunatics began crawling out of the woodwork, and the mass shootings became almost a daily occurrence. The media circus would do no more than break a story when the tents would suddenly pack up and move to another town. I began asking myself, how could this happen? I became angry. Where were these madmen getting their guns and ammunition? Why weren't these people being weeded from the general population and being locked up before they could go off on a murderous rampage? What was setting them off? More importantly, what were we to do about it? At first, I foolishly fell in with the anti-gun crowd. Before passing judgment on me, try to remember I was something akin to an alien who had just landed on our planet. I had no opinion either way on guns. I owned some, but out of fear they would be stolen, I stored them at my parents' farm. I also had no desire to shoot someone and spend the rest of my life regretting that decision behind bars. As I fell deeper under the media spell, because that's what it was, I began to question the need for American citizens to own these so-called assault weapons. According to the media, these were the weapons of choice for the typical crazed gunman. Simple logic dictated that once these firearms were off the streets, peace would return and the lunatics would crawl back into their nests. With growing interest, I began watching new laws spring up across the country, restricting gun ownership. I cheered their decision to ban assault rifles and high-capacity magazines. But the shooting not only continued, they continued to escalate, with each one becoming more heartbreaking and horrific than the last. The media demanded that still more needed to be done. Despite the outrage of the NRA, a presidential order decreed not only were assault rifles illegal to purchase, but they were suddenly illegal to own. Gun owners were given a 2-week amnesty period in which to voluntarily hand over their weapons, for which they were given a pat on the back and a small stipend. This is where I began to question the government's motives. Just days after the presidential order, well before the 2-week amnesty period had expired, reports began to surface about the authorities kicking down doors and confiscating weapons.